we're going to spend some time talking about evidence and how we incorporate evidence into our essays. Specifically, we're going to look at the idea of block quotations. The page that you're seeing on my screen right now, you also have the link to in Canvas, but I really like this because it gives us a very good rundown of what a block quote is. One of the first things that you'll notice is there is a difference between what's considered a block quote in MLA versus APA in Chicago formatting. Obviously, since our paper's in MLA format, we're going to focus on that. Some of the rules, though, still apply between APA and MLA. It's very, very simple. As always, you're going to introduce the quote. In terms of a block quote for MLA, you want to introduce that with a full sentence and a colon. You then begin the block quote on a new line. We actually don't use quotation marks, which seems kind of silly, but that's what MLA says, so that's what we do. So there's no quotation marks. We're going to continue our double spacing. We are going to set off that block quote by an additional indentation. So it's almost going to look like a paragraph of its own in a way. The other kind of real weird thing that it comes to punctuation with block quotes is the fact that our period is going to come before that parenthetical citation. Okay, so those are kind of our basic rules. Now, if I scroll on down here, you'll kind of see what it looks like in general. We have our introduction. We've got our colon, our full sentence and our colon here. We've got our quote beginning on a new line with no quotation marks. And then we have this weird kind of end punctuation. Now, the only disclaimer I'm going to throw out with this example is the fact that MLA says that a block quote should be 4 or more full lines of text. In this case, this quote is actually not 4 full lines. And I'm going to kind of switch over to a student sample and show you what I mean. So loading here, hopefully, is a student sample of our 15-page paper. This is from last semester. I've gone through and I've highlighted some of my evidence in yellow, which is actually something that I'm going to be asking you guys to do. And I want you to see the difference between what is 4 full lines of text and what is not. Here is one quote that I've highlighted. If you look, yes, this has information on 4 lines. However, in its entirety, it's really only about 3.5 lines of text. So we are not going to have to format that as a block quote. If I continue, I'm going to go back down kind of to where I was. And you'll see another one. Again, this, if we were to smash it all together, wouldn't even be 3 full lines of evidence. So I don't need to worry about that as a block quote either. If I move down here, this is probably the closest. But again, if I smash it all together, I'm missing about that much of a quote to make it 4 full lines. So hopefully you guys are seeing one reason why I always encourage you to kind of highlight your evidence is I want you to see when something needs to be a block quote and when it doesn't. So I'm going to come down here and find an example that does in fact need to be formatted as a block quote. So here we go. It is clearly more than 4 lines. Perfectly fine. So if I go back through those rules that were just presented to me on that Ashland University page, the first thing is I have to introduce my quote. I've done so here. I have my attributive tag, and I have a full sentence attributive tag. So since it's a full sentence, it ends with this colon. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and set this off from the rest of my text. I'm going to leave my quote all by itself. Okay. Then I'm going to come back to the beginning of my quote. I want to delete that quotation mark because if you remember, no quotation marks with a block quote. To make it easier for myself, I'm actually going to delete it all the way back over so it's aligned left. Then I'm going to highlight the entire quote and I'm going to move it in 1 indentation. Okay. So I've gotten rid of my introductory quotation mark. I now need to get rid of my concluding quotation mark. If you remember, the period goes at the end of the quote, and then I get rid of this period right here. So now there's only one more thing I need to do to make sure this quote is formatted correctly, and that has to deal with my analysis. With my analysis, I want to make sure that it is all the way back over to the left. If it's indented, it looks like a new paragraph. And remember, you can never end a paragraph with a quote. So I want to go ahead and bring that back. All right, so that's one example. If I scroll some more, you're going to see one more example. This is one that I need to do a little bit of revision with because you can see my attributive tag here ends with a verb and a comma. That's not how you introduce a block quote. You always introduce a block quote with a complete sentence attributive tag and a colon. And I've kind of cheated here because I went ahead and wrote what I wanted to say ahead of time. So I was a little bit more prepared. So I'm going to change this to a complete sentence. And what I want to do is I kind of want to preview what the quote is going to say without actually saying exactly what it says. So here we go. I went from states to actually explaining what the quote states. So here, Sir Ken Robinson recognizes the importance of testing while also suggesting some key reforms. So I've got my attributive tag. So I'm going to start by deleting that quotation mark, bringing everything back down here to the bottom. I'm going to separate my entire quote from everything else. I need to change my punctuation, and I need to remember to indent. And I also need to make sure that the very first word in this quote is capitalized. So I'm going to use brackets to indicate that. One more point to recognize. Here's a quote that the student did a really good job of kind of breaking up so it didn't have to be a block quote. The reality is, on your final paper, you must include one block quote. You can use up to 3. Okay, so that's kind of where we are. So this student writer was very aware of making sure that she didn't have too many block quotes. And so she kind of wrote around that situation a few times. Okay, so what you guys are going to do for me for next class period is work on integrating these block quotes into your paper. Check Canvas for your other expectations. And as always, if you have any questions, please let me know.